to another great episode of Mastering Social Media for Schools. So pumped for you to meet Amber Graham Fitzgerald. She works with the Oklahoma School Board Association there, and she does amazing work. She's got over 20 years of experience with school communication, and we're really going to break down crisis communication, both the planning aspect and the response. So there's a few things in your plan that you're going to want to say, oh, I better go check that. I better go look for that. What do my templates say? And then also just in tips on responding. And we're also specifically going to talk about, well, when should social media be used and not used? And so we're going to break into that. And then Amber also has a history in HR and actual recruitment. If recruitment has been a struggle for you, it has been for many, many schools. We're going to break down some tips that you probably haven't heard, including she's got a valuable resource in our show notes. So if you click wherever you're listening, click the kind of learn more, and you're going to see our show notes. She's got a tool for some hashtags and some things to include for social media posts to show up with some like local colleges and things. So really valuable stuff. I got to talk to Amber all day long. And maybe we'll have her back again as a guest in the future because she's got a lot of experience and knowledge to share. But you're just going to love this episode. Now, if you love social media, but you are struggling a little bit with Instagram, will you join my Instagram bootcamp? It's starting in September, and we've got a limited amount of seats left, but it's an Instagram bootcamp specifically made for schools. So if you're just struggling, what to post on Instagram versus what you're posting out on Facebook, you're going to want to join. You need to sign up soon because the spots are filling up and we do have a limited amount of space. It's a weekly training that happens live. And then we've got one other session where we actually make sure that you take action. So it's an accountability session. Okay, what are you working on? And the unique thing about this 4-week Instagram course is you basically get laid out, or I lay out the things that you're going to work on over the 4 weeks in the first session, because we know that you're busy. We're going to lay it all out there for you and then dive a little bit deeper when it comes to Instagram Reels. Oh my gosh, does that freak you out? We're going to help you through that. Instagram stories, Instagram highlights, and of course, creating really engaging content out there on Instagram. So sign up now for the Instagram bootcamp. And now let's get into this week's K-12 PR tip. All right, today's K-12 PR tip is all about your back to school night. It's probably coming up, and we want to make sure that you are inviting folks in to your social media pages at that event. I really recommend having a table set up where you're just like, hey, we're on social media. It's the best way to stay connected and all the great things that are happening. And actually having folks get out their phone and helping them find the right Instagram page, the right Facebook page, making sure that they like it, making sure that they see your page first. You can do that right at your back to school night. Now, Amber's going to give a bonus tip of something that's really going to get them to stay and make sure they're watching your pages. I'm going to leave that for a teaser because that's right at the end of this episode. But think about how you're promoting your social media channels at those back to school events. You want to get those new parents, even those existing parents, re-engaged with your social media pages. Maybe you get a volunteer group of staff or students that are going to help your parents make sure that they know where to find your pages. So that's my tip for today. Now let's dig into all the awesome stuff with Amber Graham Fitzgerald. Good morning, Amber. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you this morning?
I'm really good. I'm so excited to have Amber Graham Fitzgerald here on the podcast. We got to see each other in person a few months ago. And I was blown away just with the content that you were sharing with your background in crisis communication. And so we're going to focus in on that today. But to kick things off, why don't you just share your background and your role today with the Oklahoma State School Boards Association?
Absolutely. First of all, I want to say thank you for coming to be part of our OK Spur conference. We really appreciated it. And I understand that you were in state just a couple of couple of weeks ago too. So
Yes, this summer I got to come to GabCon and meet some other great schools from Oklahoma and beyond. So Oklahoma's getting to be my stomping grounds,
I was
Amber.
supposed to say, we'll just make you an honorary Oklahoman. We would
I
like
love it.
honorary OK Spring. And I grew up here, so very near and dear to me, of course. I actually started my career in journalism. I didn't think I would do anything different. I just wanted to be in a newsroom, worked in a commercial at a daily newspaper, even while I was going to school. In my first position out of college, like most new reporters, I went to the education beat of a newspaper of a town of about 50,000, spent a lot of time covering their local school district and school board, and really just fell in love with the mission of public education in a way that I never could have dreamed. If you know anything about journalism, that's really not your job, is to love and to want to help all the time, those that you cover. So I was very fortunate, very blessed that an opening was made available with the district to work in communications. So I worked for Enid Public Schools for 20 years and had a very long career there, had a tremendous school family, tremendous community, lots of support. About 10 years into my career, I had a superintendent who asked if I would also oversee the human resources department. So I ended my career in 2020 there as the executive director of communications and human resources. And often when people hear, well, why if you love communications would you be working in human resources? Obviously, there's a lot to learn when you take over the human resources department, but what it really comes down to is the ability to build relationships with an internal audience. So I've really found that internal communications and employee recruitment are secondary loves of mine as well. So I never thought I would leave Enid Public Schools either. I fully planned to retire there, but as they say, God opens doors, and it is on his time, not necessarily on your time. And so in 2020, about a week before schools closed because of COVID, I had no idea what was coming down the pike. I let my superintendent know that I had accepted a position with the Oklahoma State School Boards Association. The executive director here is a previous superintendent of mine who I just loved working for and really values communication. So now I have the good fortune to work with school districts across the state to meet their communication and human resource needs. So it really, I just feel grateful. It's not something I ever thought I would be able to do maybe until after retirement. And now I have the opportunity to go out to work with other districts.
That is incredible. And you have such great experience. I kind of like the communications in HR, and you're like, what? But you're right. When it comes down to it, it's all about relationships. And so really being able to pull from both of those things, that's awesome. Okay, so you've been with the School Board Association for a couple years now.
That's
Are
correct.
you based out of your house, or are they near Enid? Do you still live there?
I do still live in Enid. I have a daughter who is in school there. I have a husband who is a school administrator there. So I'm still very connected with my school family that way. But our office is in Oklahoma City because we serve 2,700 members across the state of Oklahoma. For those who might not be familiar with school boards associations, we serve school districts and school board members so that they can reach their goals and meet the needs of their students. So I am in Oklahoma City a couple of days a week. I do work in Enid some, but my favorite days are those where I get to go out and visit other school districts and help them achieve what they want for students. So we have I cannot say enough about the fantastic team of professionals that have been assembled here, from legal, communications, former superintendents who really understand governance and instruction. And we work all over the state, and there's somebody on the road in every direction every single day.
Okay, that makes sense, because just a few weeks ago, I interviewed Macy Stover, and
Yes,
she was new to her role. And she's like, the first person she called was you,
I
Amber. And
love Macy. Yes,
I love her
yes, yeah.
too. And so that's incredible that you're able to go and help so many folks. I mean, I'm sure you did great things in Enid, but now you're able to multiply it across the entire state in the schools that you get to serve.
Well, that's been the biggest blessing. And Macy probably expressed this to you. I want to say, I can't say enough great things about the work she's doing in Clinton, and also to commend Clinton Public Schools, because for the state of Oklahoma, it's relatively small to have a communication professional on staff. But the superintendent there truly understands the value, understands the difference it makes in terms of the resources and the community support that they're able to build for the school. And that is my, they say a vision statement really is about what it would look like when everything worked. My dream would be that we would have a communication professional in every school district that could give them the time and attention they deserve. But until then, I sure feel blessed to be able to be the ones not only to help them, but sometimes to be the one who introduces them to the concept of school communications.
Right.
So I'm very blessed.
Yeah. So you get to see what a lot of schools across Oklahoma are doing. And so just to really key in first on social media. So how are the schools in Oklahoma using social media, kind of in their schools to build those relationships, to share those stories?
I think the number one way is and I think it's the best way, is to really showcase the success of their students, of their school districts, and of their staff. It really gives them an opportunity, especially in those school districts that are smaller and don't have an extensive media market, a way to tell their story, not only to their parents, to their staff, but obviously to their communities. I actually encourage them that even if you're in a market where you have a lot of media support, really, even though I really believe in building and utilizing those relationships, social media gives them an unfiltered way where it's from me to you to tell you what's happening in our schools.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're doing great things there.
Yeah, yeah.
So what I wanted to dive into today is, we're heading into another new school year. The 22-23 school year is here, and hopefully it's a little bit different than the last couple of years have had to be. We have certainly all learned a lot about crisis communication, because sometimes that feels like that's all we were doing, over the past couple of years. But something, with crisis communication, it's a delicate art. I would say it's an art, it's a skill and an art a little bit. And many schools are still getting it wrong. So I was wondering if you could help walk our listeners and me through some of the best tips that you have when it comes to crisis communication.
Absolutely. I would be happy to. I think school districts do a remarkable job building trust, and we build trust in the day-to-day interactions I personally believe that we have with individuals, whether that be online and especially in person. But it takes just one situation for that trust to degrade, and for you to have to really start from scratch. I think one of the mistakes we make is we don't recognize that sometimes a crisis may not seem like a big deal to us as school employees. There are obviously ones that are very serious in nature. But the truth is, if it is of a concern to a stakeholder, then we need to be prepared to handle it in a similar nature. One of the things I would share with your listeners is, as we talk about being prepared for a crisis, obviously my area of specialty is working in crisis communication planning, which is completely separate than your crisis response plan, which is obviously critically important, and that you have a lot of input from your emergency personnel. But schools need to be equally invested in preparing for the communication piece. My goal when I'm working in a crisis situation, obviously first and foremost, is to contribute in a way that helps keep students and staff members safe. That's my first priority. But also we want to act and respond in a way that maintains trust. And I learned at my very first NSPRA conference, which I have told this story 1,000 times, and I regret so much that I don't remember who the speaker was. But we were in a breakout session, and hearing this one question changed how I did everything from then on out and how I work today. And it was, are you going to be the kind of school district that sweeps something under the rug or puts it in a backpack? And that changes everything. Because once you decide you're going to be the kind of school district that puts it in a backpack, you are all in on transparency. Parents, community members, they can trust that they are going to hear news from you, good or bad. Now, in this day and age, we don't put the bad news in the backpack. We have other ways to do that. We text our parents, we put it on our website, we email it to them, we communicate in direct ways, which I would love to talk in a little bit about as well, about the direct lines of communication. But we make sure they hear from us. So that would be the number one thing that I would encourage school districts to do. But in order to do that, you have to have a plan put together so that you can do that quickly. What I hear from superintendents and the questions I get from superintendents is, how in the world do I do that in a world of social media? How am I the one who gets to share the information when every student has a computer in their pocket and they can post it? The truth is, you probably are not going to beat that news in the sense of immediacy of it. But when you've built trust with the public, they know you're going to get it to them as quickly and as accurately as you can, which is maybe different than information that they may be getting another place. So I really encourage school districts to put together a comprehensive communication plan. And I'd be happy to run through some of those components if you think that would be helpful to listeners. Okay.
Yeah, I think that would. And just to go back, I really enjoy, crisis response and crisis planning are two different things. Yes. You cannot plan while you're in the crisis. And so I know that there's been over this summer, there's been a few of the schools that we serve, because of course we serve a lot of schools that don't have a full-time communication person. And so they're reaching out to say, hey, what are those email templates that, are from a student death or student suicide, which might be different, or a bus accident, or, all of those things. And they took the time this summer. Now we're almost into the new school year. It's probably maybe a little too late for that to be your summer project. But it's important for people to re-examine that plan. And then the response, which I've got some other follow-up questions too. But if you could kind of go through a little bit of what is the makeup of a good crisis plan, I think that'd be helpful.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. And I'm going to start with one that you mentioned, because it is one of the most important tools in the toolbox. And that is to have templates ready and for all of the different situations that might occur in your school district. And again, it's from those that are most significant that we pray never happen in our schools to those that we know are going to be happening on a weekly, maybe monthly basis, but they're going to be significant concern to parents if they have a child in that school. You want to have those templates prepared. And if you don't have those, call on a peer. I mean, if you're welcome to call me if you need assistance with those, because there will be different people in your network, your professional network, that they have the resources, and in time you'll find yourself sharing those. In fact, this morning, part of what I was doing as part of my summer planning was taking my templates and getting, I think it's probably typical for there to be a template that says, maybe weapon on campus. But I was trying to find every scenario I had worked on where weapon on campus, and these are the 5 things that happen. You want to just continue to grow the resources that you have so that you can go to those quickly. I think one of the most important things to do is to establish what the responsibilities will be for your team members in the event of crisis. Depending on what occurs, you're going to want somebody at a school site, for example. You're going to need somebody taking those initial questions. You're going to want to know, even down, one of the people who play a critical role in the first few minutes of a switchboard of a crisis is the person who's the receptionist at the front desk. And we often fail to really involve those who are going to be involved in those first few minutes in our planning. We want to make sure everybody knows what their role will be in the event of an emergency. So those designated roles and responsibilities are important. I try to keep a way that I can gather facts very quickly. While I love to work with everything online. I love to have everything digital. In a crisis, I may be in my car pulled over on the side of the road. I have often told groups of, I don't know what it was, but they tend to happen to me during my lunch hour, and more times out of 10, I was in the Arby's drive-thru when it happened. I mean, it doesn't happen at a convenient time. So I try to have not just a notepad, but something that sketches out the questions. And for me, being a reporter, going back to what has happened, who is involved, who is there, what do parents need to know? So as you're gathering information from your principal, your school administrator, perhaps if you're fortunate enough to work with the campus police department, maybe your city police, that you can gather those facts. And then you want to make sure that you have ways to contact everybody, all of the personnel and team members that you work with, your emergency contacts, your hospitals, basically everything at your fingertips, especially if it happens at that inconvenient time, that you will have that. I would try to always have all of my resources with me and then in a Google Drive. So if I had to go to a school site and did not have access to my personal equipment, I could sit down at any computer in the building and pull up all the resources that I needed by using Google.
Okay. So by physically with you, do you also mean like you have a binder that you carry with you?
You know, it was probably when I was in that job on a day-to-day basis, it was probably the only thing I had on paper on a regular basis. And I did HR for 1,100 people. We moved all that digital, but I absolutely had a bag that I carried in my car, and it had an extra pair of tennis shoes, because the last thing you want to be doing is running around in a crisis in your dress shoes. An extra pair of tennis shoes. There's actually a very extensive list of that emergency, making sure that you have a flashlight. I will tell you, for me, critical on a day-to-day basis was a pair of shoes, my crisis plan, pens, papers, and making sure that I had an extra badge with me in the event that I didn't have the one that I typically wore around my neck.
Okay. So if you have a badge, and then tennis shoes is such a good thing, and maybe a bottle of water, just so you got
that's a great
bottle
idea.
of water.
But if you've ever been through, for example, basic information training with your state emergency management or your FEMA training, there is a list this long of things that they recommend having with you. I would say for me on a day-to-day basis, that's kind of just what I learned, what I would need, because, it could be a simple, one of the things we would experience most regularly was an emergency around our campus that had nothing to do with our campus, but we still want to handle that with the same steps and care as we do. And so those were the things that I found were helpful on a regular basis.
Okay. And then you need to revisit that crisis communication plan at least annually, because we're going to talk a little bit more about staff recruitment, because I know you have some experience there, but we've got turnover. And so those phone numbers and positions change. So there's got to be a regular review of that plan, correct?
Yes. And that is really twofold. You have to have regular review of that internally, and none of this. And I actually see, I've got my notes in front of me, and I see that there's actually 10 points to the crisis. I'm not going to run through each of them. I ran through kind of the biggie ones. The most important thing is that you're meeting regularly and talking with your emergency management officials, who are going to be the ones who are going to respond and care for your staff in an emergency. So they need to know not only obviously the response side of it, but how you're going to communicate. There has to be mutual agreements about how you're going to communicate with one another and in what role each, especially if those organizations have a PIO officer, you want to have a strong relationship with them. One of the things that I found when I came to OSSBA and I was helping numerous school districts deal with their initial cases of COVID was that very few knew how to get hold of their emergency management officials, and especially their county health officials in this case, after hours. And so you want to make sure that you not only have emails, you not only have office phones, that you have cell phones. The best way to do that is to call a meeting, invite them to your district office, sit down with all the PIO officers and just share that information with one another. Talk about what will happen in an emergency.
So you're seeing the word PIO. What does that stand for?
Public Information Officer.
Okay. And so some districts wouldn't have that, but you would have your superintendent or your communications director or something like that, right?
Yeah, well, yes. And I'm actually, your police department might have a PIO officer.
Okay.
Your fire department might have a PIO officer.
Okay.
Where I lived, we needed to work really closely with our military base. So we would work with theirs. But you're exactly right. Particularly where I live, there are a lot of school districts that do not have a school communication professional. And probably the most important advice I have for them is, I understand that they may not have the means on their staff right now to add a full-time person, but there still has to be someone that is part of their roles and responsibilities.
Right.
So if they did not have a communications professional, then you would want to have the person responsible for that role collaborating with others in the community.
Okay. And so, you're talking about like your emergency response team. So
Mhm.
that's usually made up of like the police department, the fire department, anybody else that would be on that?
So
Your,
when we
your hospital?
you would want your hospital official to know. And again, since we're talking about communications, primarily you're building those relationships with those who do the communications for those entities.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Hospitals, highway patrol, military bases, emergency management. I think it probably differs state to state depending on what their emergency response, how that's established in the states.
Okay.
I think most school professionals would agree that they work most closely either with their local police department or with their sheriff's department.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. Okay, this lays out a few things. And again, Amber made the invitation. So if you need some help with your crisis planning, you can reach out to Amber. I know we've had several presentations within our membership group too, where there's some plans in there. And so if you're looking to get some more support with social media and how you do your job in communications, you can consider joining us there. We'd love to have you. So now let's get into the crisis response. And the first thing I want to point out is you were talking about, getting accurate information as quickly as you can, but, making sure you want it accurate. And you mentioned text messaging, emailing, and website, and you did not mention social media, which I'm so happy to hear. But can you kind of explain when you're in a crisis, can social media play a role, or what do you have to think about? Because, oh my gosh, that can create a whole nother can of worms, right? So give your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I did not mention it for the reason I already know, that I believe that social media is for primarily celebrations. It is not for controversial or sensitive issues. There are a couple of reasons for that. The one people most regularly think of is, I really don't want to invite some of the troubles of social media to this particular situation. And that's a valid reason. Also, we do not know. I believe that in a crisis situation, the people closest to the situation deserve to have the information first. And then if you think of it kind of like a ripple, if you throw a rock and there's a ripple, it just keeps moving out to larger audiences that then receive that information. If I use social media, I have no way to know that my parents are actually engaged on that platform, or if the platform that day will allow them to see it, because it may not be in the algorithm. It may not be in the magic of social media that day for them to see that post. So I am a believer of sending it in through direct communication, email, text, website. I will tell you, in my district, the way of choice was to text the following. There is please visit our website for an important message for important message for parents of name of school. All students and staff were safe, because I was fortunate that was very regularly the case, that we had an emergency, but everybody was safe. They would click that link and it would take them to a web page that would explain the whole situation to them.
Okay, so I really like this. So you're getting a text message, which, 99 point whatever percent of text messages are read. And instead of putting the information in the text, which information changes so often, and so putting it out in the message itself, so you're directing them to the website. It's an important message for this school, and all students are safe, because instantly, as a parent of 6 kids, I know I'm just instantly scared. And so you made sure to give where to go for the information, what school it was, and that everybody was safe.
Yes. And I like to put the safe in for this very same reason. As a mother, my blood pressure can instantly go down a little bit if I know that everyone is safe in the building. So when they click on that link, they get the information. As you said, things evolve and they happen. So for example, if we had an evacuation, at that point, it may be limited to everybody is safe. We've evacuated for this reason. The police and fire department are on site, and we will let them know as soon as possible at this time, usually something about whether or not to pick up. And then that we would send them an update. And then I continue to post the updates on top of that with the date. I'm sorry, with the date and the time. and that it is an update to that situation. So if for some reason a parent was in a meeting or they didn't get to read that initial text, they can go there and they're caught up completely on that very same web page.
Okay. And I know, that's something that we learned a lot in COVID, especially when schools shut down, was almost like maybe updating, obviously a date and a time, and then maybe, putting the most current information on top. Some people even numbered some of their updates, because especially if they do email it, it's like, hey, this is update number 10. Mm-hmm. Any other advice there?
I think one thing I would say is when you say you're going to follow up, you better follow up.
Right.
Even if maybe there's not a change of information, maybe even if it concludes and everything was fine, I will always use that very last message as a thank you to everybody who helped keep students safe that day.
Okay.
That, thanking the individual agencies or parents and staff for responding the way that they did. So you want to, as far as I'm concerned, as you're posting those updates, you want to make sure that there's something that kind of basically says, this has concluded.
Right.
Safe. And in a lot of cases and we're going to be able to go back to school safely and normally today. So,
okay. So one thing that I just want to point out, which you brilliantly put about social media being for the celebrations, and with the algorithm, we can't guarantee that people have seen things when things are changing. And because I recently saw that one of my friends went to an Eric Church concert because it's summertime, and I'm like, Eric Church? Well, I'm just seeing this post now, but Eric Church's concert was like 6 days ago. Well, Facebook determined that I got to see that 6 days later. Okay. Because people were interacting with it. So that's what you have to remember. When you put something out on social media, you don't get to pick when it shows up in the news feed for people. So if you're using it for crisis communication and it was 6 days ago, all of a sudden, Amber or I are going to be having another heart attack thinking, oh my gosh, something just happened at our school again, when it was from before. And so that's something that people often don't realize, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But you did ask me, when do you use social media?
Yes. When do you?
Because the truth is, once you send a message, somebody's going to do that job for you. And it's going to be be posted in a place that differs probably than your district page. It's going to be on their personal page or in a group or a community group of some kind. So one of your roles and responsibilities is somebody's going to be monitoring those so that you can determine a couple of things. You need to know what the community knows. You need to know if you need to adjust your messaging, maybe something has been misunderstood, you'll have that information. Also, I've seen us be able to gather some pretty good information about the investigation if you're monitoring those for somebody who maybe posted something who had information. There have been times in my career where I really felt, I don't want to say my hand was forced, but I felt it was time for me to address that matter on my district page as well.
Okay.
So if I felt based on the length of time something was occurring, or because of something that had been posted elsewhere, then I would post the message that I had on the website, but I would start with the following message was sent to so-and-so school parents this morning. All students and staff are safe. We want to thank the Enid Police Department for assisting us during the situation and keeping us safe. So I've done a couple of things. I've acknowledged the people who helped us and responded in that situation. But I've shared information with the community, but most importantly to me, I've still driven home the fact that I'm going to communicate with you directly if you trust your child with us and you're a member of our school family. So I've already done that, but now it is also on social media.
Okay. So basically, when do you use social media? First of all, you use it for listening. So that's what you kind of basically said is, hey, what is being said out there? Because it can help craft maybe questions you need to answer, or even though we always say at Amber, we're like, I told them, I wrote them an email and I told them, but they're not hearing it. So they need to hear it for the third, fourth, fifth, sixth time. So we use it to listen, even in those gossip groups that,
Right.
And then sometimes you choose to respond and you make sure to acknowledge the response team. you're really trying to keep that trusted source of information. Is that right?
Absolutely. That because you want them to know that if they want accurate information, they can trust you to be the ones that provide it. I do want to reiterate, if you don't talk about the roles and responsibilities in advance, there's not going to be anyone to do that listening for you, because if you are the communication professional, or if you're the school administrator who's taken on this communication role, there's not going to be time for you to do that while you're responding to a crisis. One way that sometimes my colleagues and I disagree in a friendly way is that I don't think that school administrators should have to be in charge of communication in the middle of a crisis. That doesn't mean they don't have a role to play. Obviously, we're all working together to get it right, but I want them to focus on the safety of their staff and their students. And if you don't have all those pieces of the puzzle together in advance, it's hard for everybody to take care of what should be their priority.
I would totally agree with that, because you can't do both well. I mean, it's just like patting your head and rubbing your tummy, right? Like you got to focus on one thing.
That's one thing I love about what we're doing here at OSSBA, because our members in all Oklahoma school districts and career tech centers are members of our organization. They can call, my cell phone is literally on our website. They can call and get free crisis communication support so that they can focus on that while I am preparing some of the things they'll need for communication. So I think it's important for that to be their responsibility.
And do most states have that, Amber, so we can make sure that they are reaching out to their state associations and tapping into those resources?
So the model itself may differ, what they do kind of on the spot, but I feel confident saying every association would say, members, call us, we'll talk to you about how we're set up to lend support. And sometimes that might be training, sometimes that might be, but they definitely are a resource to their members.
Okay, awesome. Everybody's not as awesome as Amber. Well, that's what you're going to learn. Amber, and then our good friend, Rachel Thomas from Kansas School Board Association. She's awesome as well.
Yes, she is.
But okay, this is great. So I just want to kind of wrap up the crisis. So we kind of went through what's in your plan, some of the keys to crisis response. I think you gave our listeners a lot to think about. Is there any things that you just want to make sure to reiterate with crisis?
One thing. Yes. The other thing, and I'd be happy to share this as well. The other thing I have on my plan, I think is probably a little less common, is a decision-making model.
Okay.
Because the one thing I hear superintendents question is when they should be the one who breaks the news. And they'll say, well, who's going to, I'm wondering if anyone's going to find out this happened. They are. The answer to that is they are. And so I have a list of questions. The final one being, does this have would we run the risk of this damaging trust with our community? Then I'm always a yes, that we are going to be the ones. So you need to have either a way that you run through that thought process yourself, or a conversation with your superintendent and decision makers, because you need to be on the same page that we move in a way where people trust us, not in a way where we hide, which again goes back to that transparency piece.
Okay, that's awesome. Do you have a tool that I could share with our listeners that has that decision-making model on it?
It's a list of questions, and I would be happy to share them with you.
Yes, share that. And then we're going to put that in the show notes, you guys. So I think that would be super helpful. But I love that last question. What if somebody found out about this? Would it damage a trust? And if it would, then you need to communicate it, because like you said, somebody's going to find out.
Yes. Yeah. And we've all sat in that room where we asked ourselves that question. Well, who knows?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So I want to just jump in with a couple notes, because hopefully everybody's got their staff recruited for this school year, because we're just about to start the school year. Some of you maybe already have. But what strategies are schools using to kind of specifically involve social media with their recruitment effort? Do you have some ideas just to make sure to share that with everybody today?
This is my favorite topic, because as I mentioned, I've always loved communications, and I've learned to love the HR side, and they have so much in common. And teacher recruitment is one of those, because teacher recruitment is marketing your school district. and building an environment that people want to be a part of. And social media plays a great role in that. Some of the ways that I found success was by really trying to develop relationships through social media with people I didn't necessarily have a lot of face-to-face time with, especially new teachers coming out of college. I know that there's a teacher shortage everywhere, but in the state of Oklahoma, you can bet that most spring graduates have been offered a job by about March. So we would, and I've seen other districts do the same, although I will say Enid was really, really early with using social media to recruit teachers, making sure that things that are meaningful about your school district to potential employees, not just career fairs, but good news about your school district, things that would be meaningful to especially new teachers, that you're posting on those university or Department of Education pages, that you know the hashtags that are meaningful to those departments and to the university as a whole. And you're making it easy for them to find your information on social media, because really they're looking for their information on social media, that you're making sure that your digital pass across, so to speak, and understanding how their departments and their universities are using social media is a huge part of that. In the state of Oklahoma, even though in my district, Twitter wasn't a great communication source for most stakeholders, there's a really strong following in education. And so we have a Twitter chat that is for Oklahoma professionals at 8 o'clock on Sundays. And I found very quickly, once that started, that I could almost run a commercial during the Twitter chat of the things that I wanted people to know about our school district. And the people who are going to give up their Sunday evenings for online professional development are the kind of people you want to be part of your school district.
Right.
So it's really learning and studying the social media habits of others and figuring out how to jump in. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
definitely. And that's not just, hey, join our team. It's all of the behind the scenes connections, like you said, hashtags for schools, making sure that you're showcasing what it's like to work and be in this environment. I recently had a previous podcast guest, Amanda Keller in Wisconsin, and she's like, we attracted a top teacher from another district, not because she, needed a job, but she just started seeing the things that we were doing. And she's like, that's a school that I want to work at.
That's right. That's right. And I tell school districts all the time, really great school districts forget they're doing incredible things because it's just second nature to them. Mm-hmm. So you have to when you're putting together your marketing communication plan, you need to focus not just on those stakeholders who know who you are and what you do, but people who you really would be the one, and you're introducing someone to your school district.
Yeah.
Another way that we use social media to help build relationships, which was my personal favorite, when I was recruiting teachers, we would often recruit teachers as early as February. And because we were a military town, they were often not relocating with their families until late into the summer. So I would hire someone in February, do the proper vetting, of course, through using technology, but they would be a member of my family and meet school family immediately, and I wouldn't lay eyes on them until August. So we set up a Facebook group that was just for the new incoming teachers for that year. And we really tried to treat it like an online community where they could get to know one another the minute they were hired. And it kind of evolved from me introducing myself, sharing things they needed to know, kind of being that push of information, to them saying, hey, I just got into town. Has anybody found a great place to have your hair done? Has anybody found a great doctor? Or, and they began to build relationships and a sense of community so that when we were face-to-face in August, it wasn't like we were just meeting for the first time.
I love that. Facebook groups have that ability to bring people together and for them to be able to share. Did you ever include any other current staff members besides yourself?
In that group, it was my team and a couple of administrators. Okay. I really wanted it to be a safe space where they could ask questions. If you're all new, there is no stupid question, Right. And but I think there would be great value in that, especially with some of your lead teachers, so that they could begin. We would always include our veteran teachers in our orientation where they got time where they could ask, any question that they wanted to, but I think that would have been a great addition to it. I remember the very first time someone said, I know this is a stupid question, but like, will it be cold in the room when we go to orientation tomorrow? Should we bring a jacket? That was the question I had been waiting for. It was not intended to be a formal process. It was not, you've already impressed me. We've hired you. You're a member of our school family. This is about helping take care of you. So I think anything that anybody could do to build upon that, to create that environment, would be great.
It takes me back to, I just recently heard Jason Wheeler talk about, new kindergarten parents. And yes, they wanted to talk about STEM and all of these advanced things. And they're like, they want to know, when are bathroom breaks?
Yeah.
Can I come have lunch with my kid? And, do you have naps or not? Like, and that's the same thing with adults. Like, we really want to know, okay, what is it really like to work there? And do you have a staff lounge where there's like several microwaves, or, there's little things like that that people want to know. And that's good. That's what's going to make them feel like, comfortable and like, okay, less anxiety, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It to be able to just to have those, to ask those questions of us, and to learn about the community through the eyes of people who are in the same boat, I think really matter. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize about teacher recruiting, is if you are particularly in a non-metro area, which I was in a community of 50,000, but it's a non-metro area, you are not just selling your school district, you are selling your community. And so for them to be able to discover Enid through one another's eyes, we would make sure that they knew the community events that were happening all summer, so they could go ahead and get involved in the community. If you are not partnering with your local chamber of commerce, your economic development, those who are really invested in marketing your community, you are missing out, because you can use photographs, you can use literature. They are great partners, not only for resources online, but for you to have in hand as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh my gosh, our time has just flown by, Amber, and I knew it would. 20 years of experience at Enid, and now you're helping out all these other schools. I love it. So to wrap up, I always ask, what's your best social media tip? So I know you've shared a lot of them. What would you say is your best tip?
So my favorite, I haven't mentioned yet, I'm really about building relationships, and I like to be face-to-face as much as I possibly can. When you can integrate face-to-face interaction with online interaction, I think it's just, it's gold. We would one time we used this strategy. We were at a back to school bash. We were trying to enroll little ones, many of which actually their parents were thinking about enrolling someplace else. We would stand at the booth, kind of have a conversation with mom and dad, and we were taking the coolest pictures with a green screen of the kids where they could dress up and be on the moon and be a football player. And we said, hey, here's our Facebook page. We're going to, with your permission, of course, we make sure that we did that properly. We're going to post these on Facebook. You go there, you download it, you can have that for your family. We would put our logo on the photo as well. So we had a personal interaction. They had their child in a Plainsman football uniform. It's hard not to come to Enid once you've done that. And then also hopefully gained a Facebook follower as well. So I love when you can integrate the two.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And that's a great tip with back to school, of making sure that people realize, hey, we've got social media accounts, and not only do we have them, but your kid's going to be featured on it. So they're for sure going to go look, and they're going to hit the like button.
Give them a reason to.
Yes, absolutely. So Amber, what is the best way for folks to stay connected to you?
If you will just visit our website, we're ossba.org. And my email and my cell phone is there. My email is amberf@ossba.org. And I would love to have your listeners reach out, not only to share with them, but to learn from them as well. It's a great network.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We've got some show notes there that are going to be really helpful. Definitely reach out to Amber. Oklahoma's obviously lucky to have you, but you've given things, and I know you've gotten to speak kind of all over the country and sharing some of your helpful advice. So hopefully you don't need crisis planning time too soon, but if you do, hopefully you'll have some great tips. So thanks for joining us, and everybody listening in. Let's make this the best school year yet. Share all of those positive stories out there, and we'll see you again next week. Bye, Amber.
Bye. Thank you.